morning. Today we will be talking about media audits. Let's start from introducing our two experts. Tina Bichler, Zone Europe Transformation Lead at Nestlé, and Michael Kark, Chief Executive Officer of WPP Media Europe. Great to have you here. The media landscape is more fragmented and complex than ever, with pressures of effectiveness and efficiency at an all-time high. In this context, the role of media audit is evolving. Today, we want to explore its modern purpose from both client and agency perspectives, moving beyond a simple report card to a tool for strategic growth and partnership. From your perspective, how has the fundamental role and expectation of a media audit evolved in the last few years?
Yes, thank you, Jolanta, and thank you also for organizing us for this interesting topic today. So yes, the last couple of years in the media landscape, they changed a lot. I would say the biggest challenge for us is the fragmentation of the attention, and that we need more and more fragmented, let's say, a multiply of channels and platforms and touch points to reach the people out there. This requires different ways of planning, different ways of activating, different ways of measuring the impact. And it is a challenge, and it will become even more, I would say, complex in the near future.
Thank you, Tina. And Michael, do you share the same opinion?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having us. Jolanta, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Tina, as well. I do share the opportunity. I mean, audience and touchpoint fragmentation is definitely happening. It's a significant challenge to address. I think I would just add maybe two other developments that are top of mind, I think, for all of us. One of those is the impact of AI in media. And the second is how do we use all the data that we have now access to. Let me start with AI and the impact in our industry. I think that the use of AI will fundamentally change how we plan and optimize media going forward. I think if you look at, I don't know the exact time frame, but let's say like 5 years or so forward, I don't think that a human will touch and optimize from a tactical planning perspective a media plan. That of course means that you will have human intervention, but once the plans are agreed between agency and clients, they go live. And I also think they will then basically be optimized against much more business outcomes. And then we have measurement impact on how we delivered against those outcomes. I think it's quite a fundamental change for how we work today. The second point is data. I mean, we talk a lot about data. It's all about data, and data-driven marketing is obviously a very, very important topic. I do think that from a data perspective, and it's particularly important for us here in Europe, the data needs to be addressed where privacy is at the center on the integrity of how to use the data, in particular with the GDPR regulations that we have on the one hand, but also there's a lot of consumer sensitivities about use of personal data. So I think from a brand perspective and an agency perspective, we have to really use the data with a strategy behind it and how we personalize the strategies and make sure the integrity is there and the privacy is there. One of those examples for data collaborations, because they will become much more important going forward, how brands use collaboration opportunities, is a recent acquisition that we did at WPP. We bought a company called InfoSum, which allows privacy-first access to data collaboration, where brands and publishers can share their access to data in a completely privacy-safe environment without ever moving their own data. So there's big changes coming, and it's very exciting.
Tina, when you commission a media audit today, what is the single most important business question from your perspective?
I mean, the business question that we have to an audit is mainly, besides the sheer control of the plans and the invoicing, is did we receive the right outcomes from the investment we did? I think the question to the auditors today are broader than what we used to give in the past. In the past, it was mainly about controlling and benchmarking our agency partners, mainly on the media buying, whereas now today we want the auditor to become more a strategic partner. But we can elaborate a bit further. So on the business question is mainly the business outcome. Yeah.
Michael, from the agency side, what is the most significant shift you've observed in what clients like Nestlé are asking for from an audit? How do you prepare your teams to meet these new expectations?
Yeah, so let me address maybe first the shift and then how we address and prepare our teams. We see mainly four big shifts when it comes to audits. One is around the different type of audits now. Tina mentioned before, there's more touch points, there are more things that we are looking at. But if you think about, there's obviously still the traditional audit, which is very important. But then we are also obviously also auditing digital process audit. So there could be a programmatic audit. So there's different types. The second one is when we talk about optimization against outcomes, it's also optimized investments. And that could be around brand objective or business objectives. The third is clients are really proactively asking us what else they could be doing when it comes to auditing and when it comes to making sure that the objectives are being met and what else we could be looking at. And the fourth one is actually understanding a lot more how we are going about it and why we are doing it. So I think there's a lot more deeper conversations about the work that we actually do. When we then go, how do we now prepare our teams for addressing those shifts? It goes with the most important thing is probably proactivity. I think that has been a significant change over the last years, where the client and agency conversations around the results are happening much more frequently. We are also encouraging our teams to consistently challenging and pushing themselves in terms of what we are delivering and what we are finding for new opportunities to create value. And thirdly, as the landscape is shifting, and we talked about that, we need new frameworks, because in some areas we may not have a baseline, and then we have to define proxies of what they could look like until we then establish a baseline. So it's a very fluid, sort of like ongoing conversations with clients and with auditors to make sure that, we are measuring the right thing.
Traditionally, media audits have been heavily focused on price and cost efficiency, for example, CPN, CPP. How do you now balance the need for competitive pricing with the broader, harder to measure goals of strategic quality, innovation, and long-term brand building?
I think the reality is like price will always be important, and pricing centricity in an audit is a critical question that we have to address. However, I think we also have to look slightly broader around, as you mentioned in your question, like what are the business objectives that we're actually trying to achieve together with the clients? And therefore, I think if we then focus on what are we trying to achieve, what are the outcomes that we are aiming at as a first point, and creating frameworks around that, I think that is really, really important. In particular also, as AI, as we mentioned in one of your earlier questions, is becoming more into play and we are optimizing against outcomes. I think the second point is, as we're talking more about business objectives, it's very helpful for the clients to share those objectives with the agencies so that we see, like, for example, have we achieved collectively sales data if we optimized against sales? I mean, it depends what the objective is. Or have we changed brand perceptions and brand impact? We'd have to access to brand studies. I think those are critical elements. And then the last one is, how do we quantify the value that we have delivered? And there are multiple areas. It could be just cost, it could be cost avoidance, and it could be other value elements. And I think we are challenging ourselves to constantly deliver frameworks and approaches to quantify the value that we deliver as an agency.
Totally agree with you. And we are hearing again that business context and in consequence business outcome is really present in all our discussions. Tina, what KPIs beyond pure cost are most critical for you when evaluating the total value delivered by your media investment?
So, Jolanta, this is I would say a very good question, because it has multiple layers. Yeah, I think the highest layer are really the business outcomes. Yeah, we spoke already about it. It's on marketing KPIs, can be increase in awareness, or also for us in consideration can be the incremental reach, or that we reach new groups, light buyers or other strategic audiences, but also the incremental sales uplift. Yeah, so Michael also touched base on that. These are really pure business-related outcomes. There is a second layer that is more about the media quality itself. Yeah, do we reach a certain impression as planned? Yeah, how was the layout of the campaign? Did we activate against this layout? Yeah, did we reach the audiences that we were targeting? Yeah, those kind of media quality KPIs. The third layer is on efficiency. Efficiency was always core of the auditing, but we add to the pure efficiency also some more advanced efficiency criteria. We spoke about viewability or things like that. Can also be in the near future coming more attention metrics. Yeah. And last but not least, we also have criteria on governance, on transparency, on compliance. This is also mostly then also part of an auditing to check if the whole ways of working were compliant, yeah, and also especially the invoicing. But it goes beyond this. It goes now also in the data and in the transparency in the biddable supply chain, yeah, that is more difficult to measure, but we are very much interested also to see that what we give as a biddable investment comes at the end to a certain audience and to a media owner at the end. Yeah.
Very true, and it seems that the growing complexity of media landscape is impacting and creating more complex audit processes. Michael, how does WPP demonstrate value that might not be immediately visible in traditional price-focused audit, such as strategic partnership, access to unique data, or first look innovation opportunities?
I'm glad you're asking the question because as we all realize, the traditional pricing templates can be quite rigid in terms of like deliver well on efficiencies, but not the overall value I think an agency can provide in an agency client partner relationship. And I think that the examples that we have, obviously we have great relationships with our partners. They could be tech partners or other publishers. We are constantly trying to find out where we can find ways to innovate for our clients and deliver better results, how we can do tests, pilots, innovations. That's one area. On the other hand, there's also, with more tech coming into play, there's tech fees. So we're trying to work with our clients to optimize the tech fees so that more money goes into away from non-working media into working media. Then we have this whole opportunity, obviously, also to use our own solutions where we can find bespoke audiences. And we may be able to reach audiences we couldn't reach other ways, or again, minimize media wastage. So there's a whole spectrum of activities we can bring to the table. And I'm glad to hear that we are sort of like collectively understanding that the rigid pricing templates are not the only way to assess the performance of an agency.
An audit can be seen as a backward-looking report card or a forward-looking planning tool. How do you ensure that audit findings are actively and constructively integrated into the next strategic planning cycle, rather than just being a historical review?
Yeah, from an agency perspective, again, I think this is a changing nature of the industry, and I think there's massive opportunities because we can be now more forward-looking. One of the key elements is clearly, as we're optimizing more against shared objectives and outcomes, is to ensure a strong client-agency partnership where we frequently and continuously discuss what we're seeing and what the audit findings actually are, that we implement test and learn approaches. And again, where we don't have a baseline, maybe create model audits of what it could look like and be comfortable and pragmatic about establishing sort of like that baseline. the second point is there's always been a challenge with the timing because the audits are then being done at the end of the Q4, becoming available in Q1. And what that means is we are missing the findings from the audit for the next planning cycle. I think what we're increasingly recommending is focus more on, lower effort to construct an audit, but more frequently. So if you have more frequent check-in points that then inform the planning phases, we have, better plans that we can then implement. So instead of doing a one-off sort of like end of year review, maybe doing more frequent ones and lighter touch audits. And then jointly with the client and the auditor reviewing the audit findings that we then have, because we're doing it more frequently on an ongoing basis. So it becomes really a collaboration and a partnership.
Tina, a question to you. Can you share a practical example of how a specific audit insight led to a tangible change in your media planning, agency briefing, or investment strategy?
Yeah, Jolanta, I brought one example that we conducted a few years ago. It was a huge audit effort in our programmatic investments. We understood through this audit that we have opportunities to improve heavily. And at the end, I can share with both of you that we have reduced 40% of the digital wastage. Wastage means not on target, not in geography, or not viewable. Yeah. So how did we do this? So firstly, we hired an auditor, to control our campaigns. Yeah, it was a huge sample, and then we deeply analyzed together with our agency partner, Open Mind, we deeply analyzed the findings. So one of the outcomes was that we developed so-called digital execution standards. They are key principles that need to be applied in each campaign by activating our digital platforms. This plus a shifting in the media planning from less beneficial and less quality platforms to higher quality environments. And thirdly, also adjusting the briefing itself. Yeah, when we as a client speak to our agency on a specific campaign, these three elements came to a huge improvement, and I cannot more than recommend everyone to use innovative tools in auditing, especially the digital campaigns. It is not the standard cost comparison or benchmarking. Yeah, it goes very deep into the value chain and into the activation.
Let's talk about collaboration. What is the ideal process for collaboration between agency, client, and the auditor to ensure the findings are framed as constructive opportunities for optimization, not as failures?
Yeah, in my mind, to drive really best practice is sort of like we encourage all of our teams to have, strong working relationships with all the key auditors and collectively identify, as the industry evolves, best practices and ways of working, because the intent is obviously to make the whole process as seamless and as easy as possible from a client perspective. So these working relationships are really important. And there are really four elements I would highlight from a best practice perspective. I think one is first structure the audit well. It sounds basics, but I think it's really important because just defining, what are the objectives? What are the timelines? When are the meetings going to happen? Because these administrative things can get in the way and impact the relationship. So if that's set up correctly, in addition to the methodology, if that's all defined up front, I think it takes away a lot of the friction points because we know what we're looking at, we know when the meetings are going to happen, and we know what we're going to expect. The second point is collaboration between the media agencies and the auditors. And we ask our teams to really focus on their collaboration. If there's any questions coming up or any things that are unclear, to engage in the conversation where we can clarify that as we're going into the meetings, that we're collectively well prepared. And then this last point, or the third point, is joint meetings between the clients, the agencies, and the auditors. Because then we can really discuss what the questions are and collectively identify and get rid of misunderstandings. Because oftentimes, as we know, sometimes there's an interpretation of a certain metric, or there's an assumption behind a metric that the client or the auditor or the agency would like to have more background or more information. And sometimes, in particular, when we look at emerging channels, there may even be a debate about how we actually effectively measure and assess it. So these joint meetings are really important. And as an outcome, this is sort of the final step when the audit actually happens, to define a joint action plan that everybody goes away with and everybody knows, what the next step actually are, and then following up on those. Maybe the last point that I think is really important here is, as we discussed, these conversations are becoming a lot more strategic, and the industry is sort of like changing and moving quickly. The best practice approach here also is to have senior representations from all parties, because I think that oftentimes I see that if you don't have senior representation, sometimes on the audit side, it's not as productive as senior conversations, because we may jointly define and redefine a new approach to measure something as part of the audit, actually. And the same is true also for the agencies. We need to make sure that the right people are actually represented at the audit.
And Tina, let's talk now about the audit's role in business decisions. How does a robust media audit process help you build confidence and secure investment from internal stakeholders outside of the marketing department, such as finance or C-suite?
Jolanta, this is a very good question, because the audit itself can also help us to have a very I would say data-driven and robust conversation with our CFO, or as you mentioned, with our top management. I would say those kind of stakeholders, they are very much interested in the financial outcome. So if the financial outcome is testified to an auditor, the conversation is stronger, and it's more or less audited, that the financial outcome is there. I would say it also gives a kind of a credit to the media department that we have operated with a lot of strategy, but also discipline on our media investments. These are big numbers, and I think the organization is hugely interested to control, but also to enable media teams to spend in the best way, and then to control the spend. Secondly, I would say finance and also C-suite are interested in decision-making criteria, but also in strategic conversations, and the audit results, when they go on a strategic level, can enable and support those kind of conversations. So sometimes when audit results are available, I also use it to open those conversations that normally maybe I don't have, or I'm not involving finance or our general management into the media planning as such. And last but not least, I would say it also builds trust. It is a huge investment that we position through our media agency into the platforms, into the media owners. And to testify this was done correctly in a compliant way, following our strategies, following our principles. I mentioned the digital execution standards, for example. And then at the end, coming with a control, this was done. It was even maybe over-delivered or perfectly delivered. I think this builds also credibility for the media function within the wider organization.
Michael, how do you use the audit process to strengthen the strategic partnership with a client, proving that the agency is a proactive steward of their investment and a driver of business growth?
So from an agency perspective, we very much welcome third-party verification, of results and what we're doing for our clients. As Tina mentioned before as well, it's important both internally, from a client perspective inside the organizations, but it's also important for us as an agency to demonstrate the value that we have delivered. And external auditors help with that because they are independent. We define ways of working. There's objectivity, it's verification. And that's why we are aiming for really strong working relationship with the key auditors to make sure that those relationships are good and that we understand how the processes work and we can deliver against the expectation in the interest of our clients. When it comes to, again, like how we prepare for it and how we be proactive about it, we commit real time into the process. It's really important that our teams are available and then we make our work available to make sure it can be assessed in the best possible way. That's the first part. The second part, it's also a learning opportunity. So what do we learn? Like, what can we do better? And you can imagine we do quite a lot of audits across the board with many, many clients. So we're learning quite a lot in terms of like how the audit process may have to evolve to deliver for the client as well as for the agency, but also like how the steps need to be improved or what we need to looking at. So the constant involvement and learning is quite important. And a proper debriefing. So learning is not just finding at the moment, but also debriefing and then making the process the next time around better. So we constantly evolve. In particular, this goes back to what we discussed earlier, like since the metrics are changing, they're becoming broader. We're looking at channels that we haven't looked at. So incorporating this on an ongoing basis. And we also auditing and looking at different things like digital process audits are becoming more prevalent because, in the biddable space, we need to look at different variables.
We see the rise of AI in media buying, the explosion of retail media, shift towards attention-based metrics. How do you foresee these trends changing the nature of media auditing? What new questions will need to be asked and what will become obsolete?
The three topics, Jolanta, that you mentioned, they are all very important. And I believe the future auditing need to be prepared to answer questions that are coming on top of what we currently have. Firstly, you spoke about the AI that's coming into the media optimization. And at the end, we want to testify if the media optimization was done with benefits and as expected. So the auditor need to testify, even if this was done with AI, if the outcomes were delivered or over-delivered. So the auditor need to have new technologies to measure that. I think also you mentioned on the retail media, the growth. So this growth depends very much on the country and which retailer offers what. So we at Nestlé, we have a clear strategy how to invest and also to apply quality criteria on the retail media investment. So I would say the challenge for the auditor is to measure the retail media outcomes, compare it also with other opportunities that we could have at the same time, but also at the end to measure if these retailer media investments were following the same quality standards that we have with other media, for example, brand safety. Yeah. Last but not least, you mentioned new measures like attention, and we touched base earlier in the interview already. Attention is very interesting for us to apply a attention matrix to the media buying. Let's say we do it in certain campaigns or maybe in the future in a majority of the campaigns, then the auditor also needs to apply attention metrics into the auditing. This is not easy to do fully because it's an environment that we approach in a pioneering way. It is already established, but still is new also to learn on the optimization against, for example, BPIs, against golden rules, against price, and against attention metrics. Yeah, this need to be balanced and need to be following a totality of optimization. So the auditor will be asked also what's the testify using attention metrics into the media activation. So all in all, I would say, Yolanda, there are many questions coming new, following the existing standard questions. Yeah, what is the outcome? What is the value? On top of that, I would also say, and Michael was building on it earlier, the audit will be more in real time, more in predictive, more in partnering. Yeah, this is a new way of working. Is not fully established. Yeah, we have many audits we conduct once a year. Yeah, we want to move further, building with our media agency partner and the auditor a kind of a strategic partnership. So if this is in a good shape, there will be coming more strategic question to the table instead of just controlling. Yeah. So I hope I could answer your question in this. It is a complex question, but I hope I could answer with a few thoughts.
I agree fully that the cadence of the audits will change. They will be more frequently, lower touch, more frequently, more ongoing conversations. The metrics will change for sure, and also the focus, as Tina mentioned, with AI and technology, the focus is then also a bit more like, what are the algorithms optimizing against? Are there guardrails in place when it comes to brand safety? Is there any bias maybe in there? Is there any drift? Those will become the questions. So the nature, I think, of the audit will change quite a bit.
As media buying becomes more automated and complex, how do we ensure that transparency and accountability, the core principles of an audit, are maintained?
Yeah, maybe picking up on the technology changes that we discussed, one of the big advantages is that over time, we will get more of the data directly through API links. So there will be a broader access that we have to data. But then obviously you need to make sure that there are secure access points to that data, and the handoff is very clear when it comes to the APIs. And then we need to interpret the data. So data interpretation will become a big part of the audit conversations. So we need, we talk a lot about automation, but we still need people to get involved to provide context and challenge what we're seeing in the data, and not just receiving the data and exporting it in the audit report. I think there will be a lot of conversations what we are actually seeing. I think that's particular as these API connections are happening. And then the second part is around fragmentation. We talked a lot about there's many more touch points, many more channels, how consumers engage. The spend will be distributed very differently. And so the methodologies inside the audits will have to change to better reflect that, and to better make sure we're capturing where audiences spend time and what channels are being used. And in that context, I think we have to have also more flexibility in terms of how we then conducting and measuring success in this environment, because we may not have like-for-like comparisons, and the comparisons that we may draw to may not necessarily be the right ones. Again, it's going to come back to collaboration and to conversations about how we're looking at measuring success in an ever-changing, quickly changing environment.
Tina, is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I would like to elaborate a bit more on what are the requirements that we will raise when it comes to the more detailed understanding of the output. Yeah, for example, there is one topic that we definitely will bring more strongly, and it is a request to our agency to document and to report more in depth, and ask then our auditor to check the detail of the reported processes more detailed. So it's less about cost and delivery, is more about the auditing of processes that the agency has been documented and reported. Also, we will ask our agency partner to disclose as much as needed in the whole value chain. And with this, for example, in the programmatic value chain, really to the log level data in the programmatic buying. So if we ensure this as part of our contract, then we will also have our auditor enabled to check this in the detail, the granularity we need, to understand if this optimization has been done successfully. And then last but not least, I believe we will have a more continuous monitoring of processes and work the agency is doing to testify the quality assurance, the tools applied, the data applied, the compliance requested. All of this is rightly done. We don't want to wait until the next year to have a look backwards. We want in more real time to understand those measures and those processes are fully delivered. So all in all, I think for other clients is important as for us as well to ensure in our contracts that those kind of controls and audit rights are fully given, that then in the day by day we can apply this kind of new ways of working.
Yeah, maybe just a thought and an encouragement sort of like for the auditors and the audit community. I think given that there's so much change happening in industry and we're talking about much more strategic relationships between client agencies and auditors, I think it would be beneficial if there would be a governing body from an auditor perspective. And in very similar as we see it in the financial auditing space, where in the US, for example, you have this public company auditing oversight board, and they constantly define best practices and ways of working that auditors should comply to. I think that would really help the industry quite a lot because it would give a lot more confidence, I think, I'm not trying to speak on behalf of Tina, but I think from my perspective, on behalf of the agencies, and I think also for clients to know, okay, as this is an important part of our industry, there's also a governance in place.
To conclude, what is the one mindset shift you believe is most critical for both clients and agencies to adopt to ensure the media audit fosters a stronger, more effective and trust-based partnership in the years to come?
Yeah, Jolanta, this is a very important question. I like very much how Michael described the client-agency relation to become more a strategic partnership. And this includes also other partners like auditors. I think for the future, we want to go more from compliance to collaboration, from tactical checks, to more strategic partnerships. We want also to have a culture between ourselves, the agency, and also partners and auditors, like a continuous improvement culture, that if there is a finding that everyone embrace and then immediately change the process or the KPI or the how people work. So it is on all sides. Also, it includes ourselves as a client. And then last but not least, I would say it is accountability for the outcomes. We are on the client side at the end accountable what happens to our investments, but we want also our agency partner to be fully accountable, what is done with the investments, and we also want the audit to have accountability for the control, for the consultancy, for the also challenge. So it is a evolving strategic partnership that we are seeking, less than policing the agency or, sending the control.
I fully agree with Tina. It's about joint objectives and delivering in the best interest, for the brands and the clients we work with, because ultimately then we all succeed. And so therefore, I think we're coming back to the conversations about how audits are changing and how media is changing towards delivering outcomes for clients. So from an agency perspective, I think that's what we have to focus on delivering business outcomes for our clients. And on the audit side, we need then audit partners who can help us demonstrate that we have done that. So moving away from purely just focusing on efficiency and price. I'm not saying it's not important, but evolving that and including other elements, like have we achieved the strategic business objectives? And as Tina said, if we're going more into emerging in new media, where we maybe don't have the baselines yet, have we followed a certain process that makes us comfortable that we've been doing the right thing? So I think that's where we are very much aligned, I think, in terms of like where we see sort of like the future going. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you, Yolanta. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for sharing your insights. It has been a really informative discussion, and I'm staying with a motto: real-time audit for real-time business results. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Yolanta.
Very good
Thank
conclusion.
You.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.
Thank you.